Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 14th July 2019. So let us start our discussion. Now, in continuation of our series of discussion of the questions which were asked in the preliminary examination of 2019 from the various sources like the DNS or the Focus magazine, let us take up this question which was asked in the exam. So this question read, Atal Innovation Mission is set up under which of the following? So it was a pretty straightforward and simple question, and the correct answer here was C, that is Niti Aayog. And if you go through the Daily News Simplified of 21st September 2018, you will find that this was discussed in detail, and the video discussed how Niti Aayog has fulfilled its objective. And in this, it was provided that Niti Aayog has launched the Atal Innovation Mission. So by simply watching this video, you could have easily answered this question that Atal Innovation Mission has been launched by the Niti Aayog. So the correct answer here is C. Now after this, let us start our discussion of the newspaper. This article on page number 14 is related to the Chandrayaan 2 moon mission of ISRO, or the Indian Space Research Organization. Now this is a very important topic for us from the preliminary examination point of view under the topic current events of national and international importance, and it will also form a part of the science and technology section. Now, if you look at the previous year questions, for example, in the year 2016, there were two questions related to important missions of Indian Space Research Organization. For example, there was a question related to AstroSat, which was one of the important missions of ISRO, and also there was a question related to Mangalyaan in the year 2016. And if you look at the statements which were asked in these questions, for example, the statement related to AstroSat was that other than USA and Russia, India is the only country to have launched a similar observatory into space. So the ranking of India in launching such missions have been asked in the examination. Further, if you look at the question that was related to Mangalyaan, the statement reads, it made India the second country to have a spacecraft orbit the Mars after USA. So such ranking of India related to the conduction of such missions is important. Further, in the question related to AstroSat, the weight of the satellite was asked, and also the distance of the orbit in which this satellite will be orbiting was also asked. Further, if you look at the question related to Mangalyaan, the uniqueness of this mission was asked. For example, the statement third reads, it made India the only country to be successful in making its spacecraft orbit the Mars in its very first attempt. So such special features or uniqueness and the key aspects of such missions become very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So keeping these questions in our mind, we will try to understand various facts related to Chandrayaan 2, which can be very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So before understanding various other facts, first let us look at the history of moon missions. So regarding India's history of the moon missions, India's first moon mission was launched in the year 2008, and it was launched from Sriharikota. Further, this first moon mission was launched using the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, or the PSLV. And at that time, India became the fourth country to plant its flag on the lunar surface, or India became the fourth country to place its mission on the moon. Now, what were the key outcomes of the Chandrayaan 1 mission? So it detected traces of water along with other important minerals like magnesium, aluminium, and silicon. Now, globally, the first ever moon landing occurred in the year 1969 by the Apollo 11 mission of the NASA. And almost after 50 years after the Apollo 11 mission, or the first moon landing, and almost a decade after the Chandrayaan 1 mission, India will now be launching its second lunar mission, which is known as Chandrayaan 2. And it will be launched on July 15, 2019, again from the Sriharikota station. Now, one unique aspect of this launch is that it will be launched by using GSLV, or the Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle Mark III rocket. And as you have seen in the Chandrayaan 1 mission, India had used the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, or the PSLV. So that is a key difference between both the missions of India. Now, as Chandrayaan 2 is in news, you should understand and learn that India became the fourth country by the launch of Chandrayaan 1 mission in the year 2008, which is a very important fact for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And what all it detected? So it detected water and traces of magnesium, aluminium, and silicon. And also the first ever moon mission, or the moon landing, occurred in the year 1969 by the Apollo 11 mission of NASA. And further, the launch vehicle which was used for the first moon mission of India was PSLV, However, in the Chandrayaan 2 mission, which is the second mission, it will use Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle Mark 3 rocket or the GSLV Mark 3 rocket. Now let us look at some of the special features of this Chandrayaan 2 mission. So first is that it is the lunar mission of ISRO, and it comprises of an orbiter, a lander which is named as Vikram after the great Vikram Sarabhai, who was the pioneer of the Indian space program, and also a rover by the name Pragyan. So if you look at the orbiter, it weighs around 2379 kg. And the important feature of this orbiter is that it will be able to communicate with the land-based station at ISRO. And also it will communicate with the lander which is named as Vikram. And it will be placed in the lunar polar orbit, and it will orbit the moon. Now the second important part of this Chandrayaan 2 is the lander which is named as Vikram after Vikram Sarabhai. And this lander is designed to function for one lunar day, which is equivalent to about 14 Earth days only. So this will function for only 14 Earth days on the moon's surface once it reaches the moon's surface. Further, this will also be able to communicate with the IDSN at Bangalore or the ground-based station at Bangalore. And it will also communicate with the orbiter as well as rover. And this lander is designed to execute a soft landing on the lunar surface. Now what is meant by this term soft landing is that normally it is differentiated with the term crash landing. And this crash landing takes place under the influence of gravity, and in such kind of landing there is no control over the lander. However, this soft landing is known as controlled landing, which means that the landing of this lander will be controlled from the ground station at Bangalore. And there is minimum damage in such kind of soft landing. So this is a controlled affair. Further, the weight of this lander is about 1471 kilograms. And finally, the most important part of this Chandrayaan 2 mission is the rover, which is named as Pragyan, and its weight is about 27 kilograms. So it is a 6-wheeled robotic vehicle, as can be seen in this picture, and it uses the solar energy for its functioning. And one important aspect is that it can only communicate with the lander which is named as Vikram, and that lander can communicate with both the orbiter as well as the ground station which is based in Bangalore. Now what is unique about this Chandrayaan 2 is that it is the first space mission to conduct a soft landing on the moon's south polar region. An important aspect of the southern polar region of the moon is that it is a lunar surface area which is much larger than the north pole of the moon, and further this south pole mainly remains in the shadow region. And that is why this moon mission of India becomes very important, because now it is targeting and will be gathering information from the south polar region. So some of the most important or special features of the Chandrayaan 2 are that it is the first space mission to conduct a soft landing on moon's south polar region. Secondly, it will be the first Indian expedition to attempt a soft landing on the lunar surface, and that too with the homegrown technology, which means that India has not taken assistance from any other country, and it is based on the homegrown technology, and it will be experimenting for the first time. Further, this will be the first Indian mission to explore the lunar terrain with homegrown technology. And finally, India will become the 4th country ever to soft land on the lunar surface. So all these facts are very important facts for us from the preliminary examination point of view, and they should be learned and kept in mind all the time. Further, as we have learned before, India will be using GSLV Mk3 in the launch of the Chandrayaan 2 mission. Now what this Chandrayaan 2 mission aims to do is that it will have 14 payloads. By simply payloads, you should mean that these are study devices, or these are the devices which will be gathering information, which will include scientific information. For example, it will be used for studying the topography, seismography, mineral identification and distribution, and the surface chemical composition of the moon, and especially the southern polar region of the moon. So this Chandrayaan 2 will focus on topographic studies. It will also learn and try to study the composition of the surface of moon, and it will conduct in situ studies or on-site study of the moon's surface. So which means that it does not aim to bring any material from the moon to the earth's surface on which the experiments could be done. And these experiments will be done on the surface of the moon itself by the various payloads. And again, this Chandrayaan 2 focuses on homegrown technology, For example, it has a lander which is capable of soft landing on lunar surface, as we have learned earlier. Also, the algorithms which will be used by this Chandrayaan 2 mission are wholly developed by the India's scientific community, which means that India did not depend on any other country for this Chandrayaan 2 moon mission. And finally, it has a rover which is a 6-wheeled robot-like structure, and it will be capable of conducting in situ payload experiments, which means that it will be conducting various experiments on the surface of the moon itself. Now, after this, let us look at what is the purpose of moon mission and what are the scientific objectives of Chandrayaan 2. And finally, why are we exploring the lunar south pole? And all these aspects can be important for us from the mains examination point of view. So all those points that we have learned till now are important from preliminary examination point of view, and these points will be important for us from the mains examination point of view. So the first in this line is the main purpose of the moon mission. Now regarding moon, you should note that it is the closest cosmic body at which space discovery can be attempted and documented. This is because all other planets in the space are very far off. So moon, which is the closest cosmic body, can give us good insights about the various aspects of the space. Now, as moon is the closest cosmic body to the Earth's surface, it becomes a promising place for demonstrating technologies which are required for other deep space missions. So before planning various space missions for other celestial bodies, the scientific community is focusing on moon, which is the closest cosmic body. So in this line, the Chandrayaan 2 attempts to foster a new age of discovery, increase our understanding of the space, stimulate advancement of technology, promote global alliances, and inspire a future generation of explorers and scientists. So after this, let us look at what are the scientific objectives of the Chandrayaan 2 and why are we exploring the lunar south pole. Now regarding moon, you should note that it provides best linkage with Earth's history, or the Earth's early history when the Earth's surface was formed. And further, it offers an undisturbed historical record of the inner solar system environment. And due to this extensive mapping of the lunar surface, to study variations in the lunar surface composition is essential to trace back the origin and the evolution of moon. So by understanding the evolution of moon, the scientific community is trying to understand the history of formation of Earth and the inner solar system. Further, as we all know that the Chandrayaan 1 provided evidences for presence of water molecule on the surface of moon. So in this line, further studies are required on the extent of water molecule distributions on the surface of moon. And also this mission will try to address the origin of water on moon. And we are focusing on the south pole of the moon, or the lunar south pole, because this area or this portion of moon remains in the shadow region. And also it is much larger as compared to that of North Pole. Further, it has not been explored very much till now. So that is why the understanding and the research in the South Pole of the moon will provide us deep insights about the composition and the topography of the moon surface. Further, there is possibility of the presence of water in this permanently shadowed area. And also this South Pole region has craters or deep lakes that are cold traps and contain a fossil record of the early solar system. So this will also help us understanding the origin and evolution of the solar system. And in this line, the Chandrayaan 2 will attempt the soft landing in between the two craters by the name Manzinus C and Simplified N. And they will be at a latitude of about 70 degrees south on the surface of moon. So besides having various general objectives, it also has various scientific objectives about the understanding of moon. Now if you look at the previous year questions, for example this question, it read, with reference to AstroSat, the astronomical observatory launched by India, which of the following statements is or are correct? The first statement reads, other than USA and Russia, India is the only country to have launched a similar observatory into space. Now regarding AstroSat, you should note that it was first astronomical observatory which was launched by ISRO. However, before India, USA, Russia, Japan and European Space Agency have already launched such kind of observatory, and that is why this statement becomes incorrect. The second statement reads, AstroSat is a 200 kg satellite which is placed in an orbit at 1650 kilometers above the Earth's surface. This is also incorrect because AstroSat weighed 1513 kilograms and was placed in an orbit at a distance of about 650 kilometers above the Earth's surface. So the correct answer here was D, that is neither statement 1 nor the statement 2. So by solving this question, you might have understood that these aspects are very important for us from preliminary examination point of view. So similarly, various special facts regarding the Chandrayaan 2 can be very important for us from preliminary examination point of view. Further, if you look at the other question which was related to Mangalyaan, the first statement is that Mangalyaan launched by ISRO is called the Mars Orbiter mission, which was a correct statement. The second question reads, it made India the second country to have a spacecraft orbit the Mars after USA. Now this second statement is incorrect because India became the fourth country to do so. And finally, the third statement reads, it made India the only country to be successful in making its spacecraft orbit the Mars in its very first attempt. Now this statement was also correct. This is because various other Mars missions which were launched by countries like USA, etc. had not been successful in their very first attempt. And India's Mars mission was successful in its very first attempt. That is why it was also one of the unique aspects of Mangalyaan. And the correct answer here was C, that is 1 and 3 only were correct statements. And at the end of today's discussion, we will have a practice question related to the Chandrayaan 2 from our preliminary examination point of view. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 14 talks about a centralized central equipment identity register for mobile service providers. Now, this article on page number 14 talks about a centralized central equipment identity register for mobile service providers. So this will be important for us from preliminary examination point of view under the topic general science. And under science, it will be a part of the information and technology. Now let us look at what is the purpose of creating such a centralized registry and what are the likely benefits of creating such a registry. Now in this line, you should understand that the National Telecom Policy of 2012 called for establishment of a National Mobile Property Registry. And this centralized registry or the National Mobile Property Registry was to address the issue of security, theft and other concerns including the reprogramming of mobile handsets. So in this line, the Department of Telecommunications under the Ministry of Communications has initiated a Central Equipment Identity Registry or CEIR. And this CEIR will be a centralized registry for all the mobile service providers. So what is the new change that has been proposed? Now presently what is being done is that every mobile network provider in India has an equipment identity register which is known as EIR. And this is a database of phones which are connected to its network. Now after the creation of Central Equipment Identity Register or CEIR, these equipment identity registers or EIRs will now share their information with a single central database. So this will create a single central database which will collate the information which is available with the equipment identity registers of the network providers presently. So in short, it will be a repository of information on all the mobile phones connected to various networks across India. So this is one of the purpose of the CEIR or the Central Equipment Identity Register. So what are the likely benefits or what is the purpose of this Central Equipment Identity Register? So this will help in identify and block all the stolen or illegal mobile phones across networks. And as you would be knowing that these stolen mobiles or illegal mobile phones are used by various terrorist networks, and that is why they pose a threat to the security. Now how are the stolen mobiles currently blocked in India? So when a customer reports a mobile phone as missing or stolen, the mobile service providers have the ability to blacklist the phone's IMEI number or the International Mobile Equipment Identity Number. And that is being done through their local EIRs or Equipment Identity Registers. And what these service providers do is that they block these IMEI numbers of the phone from accessing their network. However, there is a catch in this situation. So if a stolen mobile user changes the network and uses a SIM from a different network or a new network, he can still use that phone. So that was one of the shortcomings of maintaining such localized equipment identity registers. However, by the creation of CEIR or the Central Identity Register, all network operators will be aware that a particular IMEI number has been blacklisted. And that is how these service providers can block the IMEI numbers which have been listed as blacklisted. And similarly, all the illegal phones can also be tracked because the CEIR will have the access to all the IMEI numbers. And that is how the authenticity or the illegality of the phone can be checked. Also, the duplication of IMEI numbers will be checked by the creation of this central identity register. So presently, the ability to block any mobile number from accessing network was available with the service provider only. However, after the creation of a centralized equipment identity register, any mobile can be blocked which has been blacklisted under the CEIR registry. And further, after this circular of the Department of Telecom, the IMEI based lawful interception can be done. So based on this lawful interception, the authorities can use the CEIR data to access and track various illegal phones or stolen phones which are being used for illegal and terrorist activities. So this is one of the important aspects of the creation of CEIR, and these can be few important facts for us from the preliminary examination point of view. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 14 analyzes the government's decision in the recent budget of raising funds by the use of overseas bonds. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Mobilization of Resources. Now, this becomes important for us from the mains examination point of view. So in this article, let us look at the background of this overseas bonds, what is meant by the overseas bonds, and what are the likely benefits and negatives of the using overseas bonds for raising funds by the government. So now, as we have learned in the recent budget, the government has announced that it will start raising a part of its gross borrowing program in external markets in the external currencies by the use of overseas bonds. So first, let us understand what is meant by an overseas bond. So simply, it is a government bond or a sovereign bond and is a form of debt that the government undertakes. And a unique feature is that these bonds are floated in foreign markets. However, presently the government is only issuing such bonds in the domestic markets, and these are famously known as the government securities or the GSECs. Further, the government pays periodic interest on such bonds. Now, why is India considering this option of raising funds through the use of overseas bonds? So presently, India's sovereign external debt to GDP ratio is among the lowest around the world, and it stands at less than 5% of the GDP. And that is why the government is planning to borrow in the external markets in the external currencies by the usage of overseas bonds or the foreign bonds. However, initially the government has limited plan of using such instruments, and it plans to borrow about $10 billion, and which will be about only 10% of its gross market borrowings. So this is only an experimental kind of initiative where the government will be testing the benefits or the various negatives that arise out of raising funds from the use of overseas bonds. Now, what was being done in the past? So in past, India issued government bonds in rupees and they were not in the external currencies. Further, as far as borrowing in foreign exchange was done, it was only through the developmental institutions like World Bank and Asian Development Bank, etc. However, now the government is aiming at raising funds from foreign markets, and that too in external currencies. Now, due to this budgetary proposal of overseas external currency bonds, a debate has started as to if these will be beneficial or will they have negative effects. So let us look at some of the benefits that are likely to arise by the usage of such bonds, and also what are the negative sides of using such bonds for raising funds by the government. Now, after this, let us look at what are the benefits of using such overseas bonds, and also what is the current position of India which will enable it to use the foreign markets effectively. So firstly, India has very low exposure to foreign debt. And as we have seen earlier, currently India's sovereign external debt to GDP is among the lowest globally, and it stands at less than 5%. And that is why if external borrowing is done moderately, it will not be of much concern for Indian economy. Further, you should note that foreign borrowings can be cheaper because dollar or yen interest rates are lower as compared to that of rupee interest rate. And the most likely benefit is that this will bring a whole set of new investors and participants in the sovereign debt markets of India. So this increases the depth of sovereign debt market for India. The second important benefit is that it creates space for private sector investment. Now, one of the major issue of government borrowing from the domestic market is that it crowds out the investment from the private sector. And as you would be knowing that the government borrowings accounts for about 80 to 85% of the domestic savings. And that is why the private sector is not able to focus or invest in the local markets. So this largely affects the private sector investment and growth prospects of the economy. And as the government is borrowing at such a high level, there are not enough funds available for the private sector to adequately meet its credit and investment needs. Now, some economists argue that the usage of overseas bonds will enable a gradual decrease in the fiscal deficit. And also, it has been argued that the government's fiscal deficit target under the FRBM Act are unrealistic. So, in this line, the argument has been that the government should set up a high fiscal deficit initially. However, there should be a gradual reduction in this fiscal deficit. So, as compared to the current sharp targets for the reduction of fiscal deficit, the government should initially focus on high fiscal deficit, and then by the improvement in growth and collection of taxes, they should gradually decrease such fiscal deficits. And in this background, if the government sets a high fiscal deficit initially, the government's overseas program will allow the government to increase and improve the growth prospects of India. And by improving the growth prospects, the government can gradually focus on decreasing the fiscal deficit over a longer period of time. Further, this is likely to improve India's global image as an economy. This is because the appetite of international market for Indian bonds and their price will say a lot about how India is viewed globally on the risk factors. So if the foreign investors are interested in Indian overseas bonds, it will show that India's economic fundamentals are very strong. And in that way, India's economy will be viewed as a positive global investment destination. And as it has been stressed in various economic surveys and government budgets that India's economic fundamentals are strong, so that is why India will be viewed as an attractive destination for the bonds. And the foreign investors are likely to invest in the Indian bonds because of its attractiveness. Further, the domestic markets are not enough to cater the needs of government as well as private sector. And this is because of late the government borrowing has increased drastically, as we have seen that of the domestic borrowings about 80 to 85% of the borrowings is by the government. And that is why the private sector is crowded out for the investment. Further, India's shallowness of the bond market is reflected from the focus on the domestic market only. And we know that the government needs these bond markets to finance several initiatives like the Uday scheme and the recapitalization bonds to infuse capital in the stressed public sector banks. And in such a scenario, a shallow bond market which focuses only on domestic resources would make it difficult for the government to expand any of these schemes. And in this background, the borrowings from the external markets in the external currencies by the usage of overseas bonds will be a boon for the government borrowing and an improvement in various initiatives of the government. Now, after looking at these benefits, let us look at what are the likely negative fallouts of using such instruments. Now, first negative is that the precedents from other developing countries have not been very encouraging. And in this line, the economists have cautioned India that India might follow the path of some Central and South American countries, for example, Mexico and Brazil. And in the year 1970s, these countries borrowed heavily from overseas markets. However, after a point of time, their currencies started depreciating sharply a decade later. And these countries were in big trouble as they could not repay their debt. And this led to a debt trap or debt crisis for all these countries. So that is why the precedents from other developing countries who relied on such external sources of funding are not very encouraging. Further, if the foreign investments increase in the overseas government bond, it could lead to rupee depreciation. And that is why it will have negative impact and will curb the exports from India. Now, as we all know that the overseas borrowing can lead to quicker increase to India's foreign exchange reserves. And by increasing inflow of foreign exchange reserves, the rupee will become stronger over time against the dollar. Now, a stronger rupee would encourage imports because the imports will now be more cheaper. However, this will disincentivize exports because the exports will not be very attractive because of decrease in the exchange rate. And that is why this can have adverse impact on the current account deficit for India. Further, such an initiative limits the policy tools of our government, and especially the possibility for the government to print the domestic currency. Now, in case the government borrows from the domestic markets, and in case of a crisis, if the government is not able to meet its obligation, it can simply print more money. However, this option will not be available in case of overseas bonds. This is because the Indian government cannot print foreign currency to repay its debt in the foreign external currencies. Further, by using the overseas bond, the currency related risk for the Indian debt increases. Now, as most of the debt is of domestic origin, it insulates the government's debt portfolio from the currency fluctuations and the currency risks. And this provides safety from the volatility in international financial markets. However, if the currency starts appreciating or depreciating, it is likely to have a negative fallout on the debt portfolio of the government. Further, one of the major attractions for the sovereign debt bonds or the overseas bonds is the low interest rate. However, despite having low interest rate, if the currency or the rupee starts depreciating, this lower interest rate will be offset by such fluctuation or depreciation in the rupee. Further, this can lead to a slippery slope and there can be over dependence in future on such resources, and this will lead to a trouble in the future. This is because the government will not be focusing more on the domestic markets and it will find it easier to borrow from the foreign markets. However, as we know that borrowing from the foreign markets increases the risk of sovereign debt crisis, as was visible in the debt crisis of 1970s for various developing countries or economies like Mexico and Brazil. And further, such a move will have negative impact on the prospects of rupee internationalization. Now, regarding the internationalization of Indian rupee, in the past, India has stated its desire to internationalize the rupee and to make it a currency that other countries should use. For example, presently, dollar is the only internationalized currency. So in this line, the first step for India should be to make the rupee more attractive by bringing down domestic inflation. However, if India starts borrowing by the usage of overseas bonds or the sovereign debt bonds, it will likely to impact the internationalization of rupee. And this is because this overseas borrowing will create unnecessary competition for rupee related assets, and the value of rupee is likely to be affected because of such borrowing from the foreign markets in external currencies. So we have seen various negative fallouts by the usage of sovereign debt bonds for raising funds by the government of India. So after this discussion, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And with this, let's move to the next article. Now, this article on page number 15 talks about a new research by the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. And in this, the TIFR researchers have been able to desalinate seawater to produce drinking water by the usage of gold nanoparticles. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic General Science. So in this, let us try to understand what are the key aspects of using the gold nanoparticles for the desalinization of seawater and how it is better as compared to the traditional reverse osmosis system which is being used to desalinate seawater or saline water. Now, as you would all be knowing that nanotechnology refers to the modification of atoms, molecules or materials at a nanoscale. And this nanoscale refers to a very small size that is equivalent to 10 raised to power minus 9 meters. So by using this nanotechnology and using the gold nanoparticles, the researchers at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai have been able to desalinate seawater to produce drinking water. And we all know that with increasing population pressure, the pressure on the available water resources is likely to increase. So in such a scenario, if the desalinization of seawater is done effectively and economically, it will give a major boost to the water requirements of India. Now, how does this gold nanoparticle work? So these nanoparticles absorb sunlight over the entire visible spectrum, which includes the near infrared light. And as these gold nanoparticles use and absorb the sunlight, they do not require any external energy. So if you compare this process of desalinization of water using gold nanoparticles with that of reverse osmosis, it is highlighted that the reverse osmosis method requires energy and pressure. However, these gold nanoparticles do not require any external energy to produce usable or potable water from the seawater. Now, in the reverse osmosis process, a membrane is used which is known as semi-permeable membrane. And this membrane allows the passage of water molecules only and does not allow majority of dissolved salts, organic materials, bacteria and pathogens, etc. However, for the reverse osmosis process, external energy and pressure is required. And that is why this discovery by the researchers of using gold nanoparticles for desalination of seawater provides a major boost because it does not require external energy to produce potable water from the seawater. Further, another important use of gold nanoparticles is to convert the carbon dioxide into methane. Now, when these gold nanoparticles absorb light, the electrons in these gold nanoparticles are excited. And when these excited electrons are transferred to the carbon dioxide, it gets converted into methane in the presence of hydrogen. So this is another use of gold nanoparticles besides its usage in the desalinization of seawater. So these are few important facts and should be kept in mind. And with this, let's move to the next article. Now this article on page number 9 is related to a legal battle which has started between the PepsiCo and the farmers of Bihar. And in this, the PepsiCo has alleged that the farmers are growing the potato variety which it uses for its Lay's chips. And under this, the PepsiCo claims that this growing of potato by the farmers is illegal and is in contravention with the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act of 2001. Now, this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic Rights Issues. And also, it forms an important part of the intellectual property rights. Now, we have already covered this aspect of the legal battle between the PepsiCo and the farmers of Bihar, and also various and salient aspects of the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act of 2001 in a previous DNS video of 5th May 2019. So for beginners, let us once again revise from that video the various and salient aspects of the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act of 2001. Now, this article on page number 14 talks about the legal battle that has started between PepsiCo and the farmers in Gujarat. And in this legal battle, the PepsiCo has dragged the potato farmers from Gujarat to court for allegedly growing its registered potato variety which is used to make the Lay's chips. And in this legal battle, both the farmers as well as the PepsiCo is claiming that their right which is protected under the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act 2001 has been infringed. So this will form a part of the preliminary examination syllabus under the topic Polity, in which it will be included in the rights issues. So it becomes important for us to understand the basics of the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act 2001. And one of the important aspects which is highlighted in the article itself is that the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act was enacted in 2001 to comply with the WTO's agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or the TRIPS, which can be an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. And you can find a statement in the exam claiming that the PPV and Farmers' Right Act 2001 was enacted to comply with the WTO's TRIPS agreement. So that statement will be correct. So let us look at some of the key features of this act which was enacted in 2001 to comply with the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights of WTO. So the Protection of Plant Variety and Farmers' Right Act 2001 is an act of the Parliament of India, and it was enacted to provide for establishment of an effective system for the protection of plant varieties, the rights of farmers and the plant breeders. And this was done in order to encourage the development and cultivation of new varieties of plants. And to accelerate the agricultural development in India, it was realized that it is necessary to protect plant breeders' rights to stimulate investment for research and development for the development of new plant varieties. So in order to develop new plant varieties and to improve investment and research in these new plant varieties, it was realized that such an act should provide protection to the rights of the plant varieties, the rights of farmers as well as the plant breeders. And such a protection was likely to facilitate the growth of seed industry, which will ensure the availability of high quality seeds and planting materials to the farmers. So such a protection has been provided in this act to promote and boost investment and research in new plant varieties, and also to facilitate the growth of seed industry. And this will ensure the availability of high quality seeds and planting materials to the farmers. Further, this act was enacted in accordance with the Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, or the TRIPS of the WTO. And as India signed the TRIPS agreement under the WTO, India enacted the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act 2001. So in accordance with the principles of the TRIPS, it provides intellectual property rights to the plant breeders, researchers and farmers. And under this act, the rights are provided for a new variety and the denomination which has been assigned to this variety by the breeder. So for example, the PepsiCo has provided a brand name to this variety of potato. So that is also protected under this act. However, certain rights have also been provided to the farmers in this act. Now under this act, the farmers are entitled to save, use, sow, resow or exchange or sell their farm produce including the seed of a registered variety in an unbranded manner. So the farmers can also use the variety of seeds which have already been registered by other companies or other farmers. However, in using those seed varieties or the registered seed varieties, they will have to sell or exchange their farm produce in an unbranded manner, which means that the farmers cannot sell this variety which has already been registered by other persons under the name of a new brand. And if a farmer's variety is registered under this act, it is exempted from the payment of any fee. Further, the protection is provided for almost 15 years in case of trees and 18 years in case of vines. Further, the farmers can claim compensation if the registered variety fails to provide expected performance under the given conditions. So for example, if the PepsiCo indulges in contract farming with farmers of a particular area and if that variety does not provide expected performance, the farmers can claim compensation in such a scenario. So this is also one of the important rights that have been provided to the farmers. Now the rights that have been provided under this act to the person or the company which registers a variety of plant or seed, they have an exclusive right to produce, sell, market, distribute, import and export that kind of variety. Further, if these rights are compromised, then civil and criminal remedies have been provided in this act. However, if a company tries to monopolize a kind of variety of seed, the government has provided benefit sharing and compulsory licensing in case of registered variety. And the government can invoke the provisions of benefit sharing and compulsory license in case the registered variety is not made available to the public at a reasonable price. And in case of compulsory licensing, the government can provide rights to another company to produce or use that kind of seed variety so that the prices become low and the company is not able to undertake the monopolistic business policy. Further, this act provides for compensation to rural or village communities if any registered variety has been developed using any variety in whose evolution such village or local community has contributed significantly. So if a village or a rural community has contributed in the evolution of a particular variety and if another company gets it registered, then these villagers and rural communities have to be compensated by that company. So for example, a company A gets a seed S registered and in the evolution of this seed or plant variety, the village or the rural community has contributed. So in such a scenario, the company A will have to compensate the rural communities as well as the villagers. Now, as this act provides rights to the plant breeders to sell, market or distribute their product, and also it provides right to the farmers who can also use a registered variety. However, in an unbranded manner, it has led to this issue which has arisen in the state of Gujarat, where PepsiCo has sued some of the farmers for growing the variety which was registered by Pepsi. Now, after protests by the farming communities and farming organizations, the Pepsi has now withdrawn the case. Further, an authority has also been created under this act, and the name of this authority is the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Authority of India. So it is a statutory body and has been created by the Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act of 2001. So the important points for us from the preliminary examination point of view are that this act was created in 2001 in accordance with the TRIPS agreement of WTO. Further, this act provides intellectual property rights to the variety as well as the denomination which is assigned to it by the breeder. Further, it provides rights to farmers, and under these rights, the farmers can use already registered variety of seeds, however, in an unbranded manner. Further, it also has provisions of benefit sharing and compulsory licensing, and also an authority has been created under this act. So these are few important aspects for us from the preliminary examination point of view. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, after today's discussion, let us try and answer these questions from our preliminary examination point of view. And the answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the first question reads, which of the following are correct about the Chandrayaan 2 mission? The first statement reads, it will use Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Now this statement is incorrect because it will use the GSLV, and that too GSLV Mark III. The second statement reads, it will make India the first ever country to soft land on the surface of moon. This statement is also incorrect. This is because India will become the fourth country to soft land on the surface of moon. So the correct answer here is D, that is neither one nor two. The second question reads, consider the following statements, and the first statement is that after Chandrayaan 1 mission, India became the fourth country to reach the lunar surface, and this is a correct statement. The second statement reads, it will be the first space mission to conduct soft landing on Moon's south polar region. So this statement is incorrect because Chandrayaan 1 did not have any objective of landing on the Moon's south polar region, and that too soft landing. So correct answer here is A, that is 1 only. After this, you should try and answer these two questions, and the answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. So the first question reads, consider the following statements. First is that gold nanoparticles can be used for desalinization of seawater. And this has been established by the research that we have learned in the article. Second is that no energy is required in desalinization of seawater by a reverse osmosis process, which is an incorrect statement. So the correct answer here is A, that is 1 only. The fourth question reads, India enacted Protection of Plant Variety and Farmers' Right Act of 2001 to comply with the agreements of which of the following organization? So as we have learned in the article, the correct answer is WTO, or the World Trade Organization. With this, we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let's move on to the question for the day.